Welcome back, Pokemon trainers. My name is Gabby Snyder, and I'm joined here by Jamie Boyd for the next round in this top 16 round of the Victory Road World Cup, sponsored by Elgato. Jamie, you just had a really exciting match last round. Are you ready for another go around?
Yeah, it's an amazing last match. We saw Sticky Web come out of nowhere from that Araquanid. It's a move that I hadn't seen the name of for years at this point. So yeah, it was really cool to see that come out and really clutch that game too. Unfortunately, not able to take it all the way, but yeah, really cool tech coming out. And I'm excited to see all the other cool techs that we are going to be seeing. And in this game, we're going to be seeing Peru versus Singapore. So we'll have to see what the players are going to be bringing to this match. We can have a look at how Peru and Singapore are currently doing in this top 16 bracket. It seems like Peru have taken the advantage. They are currently 2 wins to Singapore's no wins there.
But it's interesting to note that all these wins are 2-1 rather than a 2-0. So this could be a good indication that we're in for some really close matches. Today's match will be featuring Orlando Luna versus Harrold Khoo. And I loved the little sneak peeks of the teams that we saw in between round. Why don't we go ahead and take a closer look at Orlando's team? Top 12 in the Player Cup 3 Global Finals and running a very interesting team of the Xerneas, Incineroar, Gastrodon, Rillaboom, Volcarona, and Amoonguss.
Yeah, we normally see the Urshifu Rapid Strike in that Gastrodon slot on these kind of Xerneas teams. But opting for the Gastrodon, probably focusing a bit more on the Volcarona setting up, because you do allow it to keep it safe from those water type attacks that could come out onto the Volcarona, because the Surging Strikes is the main threat to Volcarona at this point in this format. Keeping it safe, being able to set it up a bit more with the Quiver Dance. I wouldn't be surprised if it is a bit more offensive with the Quiver Dance rather than the redirection. You do have that available in the Amoonguss, and you've also got the classic support with the Xerneas, with the Incineroar on the Rillaboom. So you've probably got two setup Pokemon with the Xerneas and the Volcarona, and then you've got the rest of the Pokemon to try and get that to happen.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see these teams take on Volcarona as their secondary setup Pokemon, since that's something from past metagames that I feel like Volcarona was always happy being that supportive Pokemon itself. So it's nice to see it take center stage. Speaking of taking center stage, Harold's team will be stepping up to the plate next. Also, a accomplished trainer getting winning the 2019 Singapore special event. And also running a Xerneas team with Incineroar, or Shifu Rapid Strike, or not a Moongus, that's a Rillaboom, Shedinja, and the Stakataka. So two very different takes on Xerneas teams.
And it seems like Harold is a bit more anti-Xerneas on their team with the Shedinja and the Stack Attacker. There's no real good way of dealing with Xerneas over on Orlando's team. You've got that Amoonguss that can help out. Maybe it has access to Clear Smog, but Stack Attacker is going to be able to just KO the Xerneas with its Gyro Ball, and Shedinja is going to completely ignore it with its Wonder Guard ability. So it's definitely going to be an uphill battle for Orlando coming out here, because you do need to contend with those two very hard Xerneas checks when you only really have your Amoonguss to contend with for the opposing Xerneas.
Yeah, and I'm really curious to see how we're gonna watch this game play out because of that. So let's go ahead and get this game started. Looks like we'll be watching from Orlando's perspective here, as we do get a little sneak peek at the hold items that these Pokemon are going to be holding. So some interesting picks there already. I really like the leftovers on the Volcarona.
It's going to pair really nicely with the Rillaboom setting up that grassy terrain as well. We do often see a Citrus Berry on the Volcarona. That's usually to be able to survive the three Surging Strikes coming out from the Urshifu. But when you've got the Gastrodon on the team, you don't really need to be able to survive that attack, because you can just ignore it when you switch in the Gastrodon with the Storm Drain. So opting for the leftovers instead is going to allow you the same recovery as the Citrus Berry across 2 turns. And then when you get to that third turn, you're going to enable the extra recovery. This is with the grassy terrain recovery as well, getting 12% recovery each turn. Potentially as well, and even just the 6% with the leftovers is still going to be some very good recovery. And Volcarona does pair well into the opposing Xerneas as well. If you can match the Quiver Dances with the Geomancy, you're not going to be able to take too much damage. Both Pokemon won't be able to do much damage to the opposing one, but maybe if the Volcarona is carrying something like Struggle Bug along with the Quiver Dance, it'll be able to reduce the damage even further of the opposing Xerneas, help out your own one to be able to take it on a little bit better. But you also do need to contend with the Stack Attacker and the Shedinja. The best way through the Stack Attacker most likely going to be that Gastrodon, so I wouldn't be surprised if we do see that brought to this match. Could be keeping it safe from the Volcarona, safe from the Rapid Strike that is coming out from Harrold's side as well. But Shedinja is something that you've always got to contend with. When you see the Shedinja, you usually got to bring every single Pokemon that can hit it, because as soon as you lose those, you instantly lose the game.
So here we go, getting started with this game 1 of Peru versus Singapore in this round of top 16. Looks like we're getting the Rillaboom and the Urshifu lead on Harrold's side of the field, and Orlando going to be sending out the Volcarona and the Rillaboom. So a great opportunity for Volcarona here already at the start of this game.
Especially if you've got that Gastrodon waiting in the back. But then you do have to contend with that Rillaboom that could be just going for those grass moves into the potential switch-in of the Gastrodon. So quite nice covering for Harrold there, going with the Urshifu. Can be able to threaten down that Volcarona very well. And it's got the Rillaboom to be able to somewhat cover for the Gastrodon as well. If you can go for the grass type move into the Gastrodon switch in, that could open up the Urshifu to be able to get that Surging Strikes, and that would put a stop to the Quiver Dances that could come out from the Volcarona. Because that is what you want to be going for here. You want to be getting yourself faster than the Urshifu. You want to be able to do some really good damage to the opposing Rillaboom as well. Because we did see the sneak peek. There isn't a grass type coverage on the Volcarona. No Giga Drain coming out here. So not going to be able to threaten down that Urshifu too much. It would really have to be the Rillaboom, or just completely ignore it with this Gastrodon switch in.
There's Gastrodon taking the field and taking those Surging Strikes for Volcarona. Also taking a fake out from that Rillaboom for its trouble, but Urshifu not falling for it. Going for the U-turn to allow Harrold to switch in a Pokemon that might have a better matchup against the Gastrodon. You would think that the Rillaboom would be all that Harrold would need in this situation, so could try and sneak the Xerneas out here, but it's a tough call. We know Orlando's Pokemon, but until we see more from Harrold's, it's hard to guess who's going to be making an appearance.
The Xerneas, if it switches in here, it's going to be a little bit behind on the setup if that Volcarona is able to get up that Quiver Dance. It is going to be the Xerneas at least, but with the Quiver Dance most likely coming out from the Volcarona, it's going to be able to put itself faster than the Xerneas and be able to get some really good damage off before that Geomancy could come off. So being able to get a little bit of a head start here is going to be very useful for Volcarona.
It is, as it will take 1 increase in its special attack, special defense, and speed for its trouble. You know, the one thing I'm interested about here is the fact that the Volcarona can, feels like it almost has to target that Rillaboom so that the Gastrodon isn't KO'd in a single hit by a Grassy Glide this turn.
And you do need to keep the Gastrodon safe so that you can use it to counter that Urshifu as well. So maybe going to be protecting the Gastrodon, maybe you even switch it out. It's not really threatening too much at this point. Maybe you do just switch out back into your own Rillaboom. You'll be able to reset the fake out pressure onto the opposing Rillaboom and the Xerneas. And Rillaboom's not going to care too much about the grass type moves that could be coming out into it as well. And you've got to decide whether you go for that second Quiver Dance to try and match the 2 boosts of the Geomancy, or just immediately go on the offensive before that Geomancy comes off.
Gastrodon going on the defense with a Protect, and that Volcarona happy to go for the Struggle Bug to lower the special attack of both the Rillaboom and the Xerneas on the opposing side of the field. So Orlando using Protect to find Gastrodon 1 turn of safety from that Rillaboom, but could be put in a difficult spot the next turn as Xerneas is able to use Geomancy this turn to boost its special attack by 1 stage thanks to the Struggle Bug, but its special defense and speed by 2 stages each. So that'll be a really interesting Pokemon to contend with. Also, Rillaboom U-turn, no grass type attack into that Gastrodon. Possibly trying to get a different Pokemon back out on the field. Maybe something like the Shedinja. Or probably not in this situation.
Yeah, you've got to be expecting that the Gastrodon was switching out there in the fear of the grass type move. So trying to pivot out into either the Urshifu or whatever is waiting in the back as well. But still got the Rillaboom on the field here. The Protect has been used up from the Gastrodon, so it is going to be completely open now to the grass type attacks that could come out because Rillaboom wasn't able to switch itself out. But the Struggle Bug is really going to help out, reducing that damage output from the Xerneas. With the Geomancy speed boost, it should be outspeeding Volcarona at this point, so you're going to be able to have to take a Fairy type attack before a second Struggle Bug, and maybe you still go for the Quiver Dances at this point because you've effectively matched the Xerneas with the Volcarona. You've got +1 special attack on the Xerneas and +1 special defense on the Volcarona, so they're kind of equaled out at the moment.
Harrold revealing his last Pokemon brought to this match. It will be the Incineroar, coming out a little bit too early to get an Intimidate down on a physical attacker, but will be bringing that Fake Out support, Snarl support, Flare Blitz, all those good Incineroar moves that I think y'all are familiar with already at home. Orlando also going to take his opportunity to reveal his own Incineroar, will get the Intimidate to stick on the opposing side of the field, which could come in handy. Xerneas Moonblast into the Incineroar does a ton of damage thanks to the +1 special attack, forces Incineroar to immediately consume the Citrus Berry to heal its health back up, and another Struggle Bug will bring Xerneas back down to neutral special attack, but given how powerful that Moonblast was on the Incineroar, you have to wonder if it could still threaten a KO even at neutral.
It looks like it'll be pretty close because the Incineroar, it did take over 3/4 damage because it was able to still stay in the yellow with that Citrus Berry, but the grassy terrains put it back over half, so it is going to be very close if it is going to still be in range of that Moonblast. And you've effectively cancelled out the special attack boost of the Geomancy at this point. Now, you've still got the special defense boost and the speed, so you're definitely going to be moving first and you'll be able to survive the Volcarona attacks pretty comfortably, but you're not going to be doing as much damage to the opposing side of the field, especially if more Struggle Bugs come out from the Volcarona. If you put the Xerneas down to -1, you'll be able to take it on a lot better with the rest of your Pokemon. Your Incineroar will definitely be able to survive a Moonblast at that point, especially because you've got the Fake Out pressure active. On this turn, the Incineroar can go for the Fake Out into the opposing Xerneas. But it's interesting to see that the Incineroar was the final Pokemon. That means Orlando didn't bring their Xerneas to this matchup.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see that he didn't bring the Xerneas, given that this does feel like a Xerneas mirror match. But for now, Volcarona happy to fill that role with a second Quiver Dance to bring it up to the same number of boosts that Geomancy gets, but a Roar from the opposing Incineroar will force it off the field, and Rillaboom chosen to be switched out instead.
Yeah, very nice tech coming out from the Incineroar. Almost certainly going to be usually for that Xerneas weight that wasn't even brought to this match at this point, but still going to be able to roar out any other kind of setup Pokemon. And the Volcarona going for that second Quiver Dance, immediately losing it here straight away. A really, really nice roar from the Incineroar. It did drag out the Rillaboom, so you've got the potential to just fake out this Xerneas once again, because the Incineroar got the fake out last turn, you can get the fake out this turn. Maybe get a parting shot down with the Incineroar, so you can reduce the Xerneas even further. A little bit of a missed opportunity to get that Xerneas down to -1 with the Struggle Bug. A Struggle Bug would have been much more effective than that second Quiver Dance, but not knowing about the Roar, the Quiver Dance would have made a lot more sense if the Incineroar doesn't carry that tech. But really nice option coming out for Harrold here to get rid of that Volcarona, which is going to have to come back in at some point and set up once again in the future.
Rillaboom with its own Fake Out, flinching that Xerneas as a parting shot from Orlando's Incineroar will connect with the opposing Incineroar and give him the opportunity to get that Volcarona back out onto the field. But unfortunately, if the Volcarona does make an appearance, it will have to Quiver Dance twice to get those boosts back, which it won't be too much of a trouble with the Xerneas and the Incineroar on the field, but Harrold could find a parting shot of his own here to go for a switch. Instead, Flare Blitz will connect with the opposing Rillaboom. Doesn't do much damage thanks to those Intimidates, and also thankfully avoids the burn.
Yeah, not doing too much damage to the Rillaboom means it's going to be able to survive another one of those and not doing over half damage. That will allow the Rillaboom to very safely go on the offensive if it wants to, or just pivot out with the U-turn as well. Volcarona's hit the field once again. Now you know about the Roar on the Incineroar. It's in this awkward mind game as do you go for the Quiver Dance as the Incineroar just goes for the Roar? There's no real offensive pressure onto the Incineroar at this point with the Rillaboom and Volcarona on the field. We know it's got access to Struggle Bug. It's going to have its Fire Move as the other offensive coverage. Not going to be able to hit this Incineroar too well. Maybe you just go on the offensive immediately, accepting that you're going to get roared out. Or you can still try and Quiver Dance in the face of that Incineroar because you still won't be taking too much damage from the Xerneas. Maybe you just go for the Struggle Bug as well into the Xerneas, put it down to that -1, so it's really not going to be doing as much damage.
Xerneas starting the turn off with a Protect to avoid taking damage, as Struggle Bug is the move of choice for the Volcarona. Will not connect with its intended target though, which could make things a little bit more difficult for Orlando next turn. Rillaboom with the U-turn into the Incineroar. This could be a really nice opportunity to get the Gastrodon out on the field so that Orlando has some offensive pressure against the opposing Incineroar going into the next turn. Another Intimidate would be pretty nice as well.
We said that there wasn't too much damage coming out onto the Incineroar, but it's been put below half with the combination of those two Bug-type moves. So actually starting to chip away at this Incineroar pretty well. That means the Incineroar, it's fine to come in here to get the Intimidate down onto the Incineroar. You don't need the offensive pressure too much onto the Incineroar with the Gastrodon at this point, because you're actually still doing reasonable chip with the Struggle Bug and the U-turn. But Parting Shot is going to be switching that Incineroar straight out once again.
Yeah, as I was thinking about it, it's interesting for Orlando because really the Gastrodon is the best Pokemon to really threaten the opposing Incineroar, and it certainly is a bit of a problem for him. But on the other hand, you know, Volcarona is happy to sit there going for Struggle Bugs and getting decent chip, like you mentioned, and the double Intimidate down onto the opposing Incineroar as well really mitigated how much damage it could do. The one thing I'm curious about here for Harrold is whether or not he would go for the Urshifu to switch back in, given its advantageous position. But I think the fact that Gastrodon is still lurking in the back of Orlando's party really limits Harrold's options, and as a result has put this Rillaboom really in a very dangerous position.
Yeah, without that Gastrodon waiting in the back, it would have absolutely been the Urshifu switching in there. It's facing down two fire types, that's exactly the position it would want to be in, but then just having that Storm Drain available limits the options really a lot but on the Urshifu, meaning Rillaboom is the choice of switching into two fire types. That's definitely not what you want at all. You've got fake out pressure at least with the Rillaboom. You can put a stop to one of the attacks coming out from the Incineroar or the Volcarona, but if you go for fake out into the Volcarona, you have to contend with that potential Flame Body as well.
Well, it's fake out into the Volcarona, but no Flame Body activation. Moonblast following it up for some damage onto the Volcarona. Also rolls into the special attack drop, which is going to be huge. Parting Shot from that Incineroar, initiating another switch as both Orlando and Harrold are really struggling to find the board position that they're looking for and are just content with getting this chip damage down. I mean, it appears that Orlando's Pokemon are all hovering around 50% of their health. You have to wonder if Harrold's in a similar position on his side of the field.
It does seem like we're just slowly grinding down the HP of all of the Pokemon, and no real true offense coming out because that Quiver Dance was rolled out, because that Geomancy was Struggle Bugged and Parting Shotted down. There's not really going to be too much offensive pressure on the field. The Rillabooms aren't going to be able to do too much here into the opposing Rillabooms, not into the Volcarona as well. Can get some reasonable damage down into the Xerneas, but at this point, now you've been put to at least a -1 special attack. This could be an opportunity to start switching out your Xerneas. Usually you don't want to sacrifice your Geomancy boost, but now you're going to be doing less damage than if you just switch out and switch back in the future. So we'll have to see how much Harrold values the speed boost and the special defense boost that you got from the Geomancy as well. Speed boost not going to matter too much. You're probably going to be the fastest Pokemon regardless with your Xerneas unless that Volcarona gets some Quiver Dances up, but the special defense boost does at least keep it safe from the Volcarona.
The Volcarona and the Gastrodon, though, looking at how Orlando has been positioning himself over the past couple turns, I feel like the Rillaboom and the Incineroar really are his Pokemon of choice to be threatening that Xerneas. For now, though, another turn, another switch as the Incineroar takes a spot on the field for Harrold. Moonblast from Xerneas into the Rillaboom as Volcarona switching things up, going for a Heat Wave. Does not do any damage thanks to the parting shots that we've seen play out. And lo and behold, a surprise switch from Orlando with that U-turn on the Rillaboom. This is truly a revolving door of Pokemon.
Yeah, absolutely is. We're seeing all the U-turns, all the parting shots, and yeah, the Volcarona really doing no damage at all to the Xerneas or the Incineroar. The special defense booster, you can see how valuable it is, especially with the damage reduction of the parting shots as well. You really need to be having your Quiver Dances up with the Volcarona to be able to threaten any good damage at this point. So it's a pretty grindy game. May even go to time at this point because it's just slowly chipping away at everyone. We've got the grassy terrain recovery, keeping everyone somewhat healthy. You've got leftovers available on the Volcarona that's going to be recovering a lot as well. You can see already the value that it would have had over the Citrus Berry because the Volcarona has been sat on the field for multiple turns at this point. You're going to get a lot more recovery out of the leftovers than you would have done just from the Citrus Berry. So going to be a bit more healthy on the Volcarona than it would have been done otherwise. So quite a nice item choice coming out here, especially because of this slow-paced game. Going to be just slowly chipping away at the HP. And if it's just chip damage that's coming out, then the leftovers is going to be able to cancel it somewhat. And you'll be able to do some reasonable damage to the Incineroar as well. It's definitely going to be in range of an Earth Power coming out from the Gastrodon. But Incineroar most likely going to be able to Parting Shot itself out once again into either the Urshifu or the Rillaboom. Maybe the Volcarona. ones to consider switching out as well. You want to get rid of those passing shots so you can do some good damage with your heat waves going into the future, especially onto the Rillaboom, because as soon as you take care of the Rillaboom, the Gastrodon gets freed up quite a lot, because you've got the drops onto the Xerneas with the Struggle Bugs and the passing shots. It won't be able to do as much damage to the Gastrodon. It should be able to outstall it with just the recovers. So really, if you can take care of the Rillaboom on Harrold's side of the field, it will free up your Gastrodon quite a lot.
The interesting thing about this Gastrodon is that it does not have access to any water type moves, as we just saw, but it does have access to a little status stealing friend that is very fun. But Xerneas going for a second Geomancy. Now, as it has already consumed its power herb, it will take 2 turns, but Gastrodon possibly punishing it for that attempt, as the Yawn will connect, forcing Xerneas to go to sleep at the end of the next turn. We also saw a failed parting shot from that Incineroar into the Volcarona.
A very nice reveal of the Yawn from the Gastrodon. The perfect time to do it as well. And normally you'd want to switch out of the Yawns, but because the Xerneas went for that second Geomancy, it's not got access to its Power Herb anymore. It is guaranteed to be the 2-turn move. That means it's going to get its Geomancy at least, but it's guaranteed to fall asleep. It can't switch out of this 2-turn charge up. So very nice reveal of the Yawn, and no access to recover on the Gastrodon as well. Opting for the Yawn instead is actually very nice onto this Xerneas instead. Without the Yawn, the Xerneas would have been able to get that second Geomancy pretty much for free at this point. You can get some Struggle Bugs down into it, sure, but yeah, the second Geomancy, it's going to be really, really good for the special defense. It's going to take on the Gastrodon a lot more comfortably, as well as the Volcarona, but it is going to be going to sleep at the end of this turn.
Yeah, and I think the importance of keeping the Rillaboom and the Incineroar alive in back of Orlando's party has just increased in importance. Volcarona also going for some boost of its own this turn with another Quiver Dance, as Incineroar is able to successfully connect a parting shot to that Volcarona. Going to be switching out, but another difficult choice, because we saw the benefit of what Orlando locked into move-wise here. If Harrold falls for Orlando's trap and sends in the Rillaboom here, it's going to be taking a lot of damage, but Harrold making a safe play, sending in the Urshifu to take that Ice Beam, despite the fact that Gastrodon is on the field and it will be struggling to deal damage with its water-type attacks.
Yeah, it was a really nice play coming out from both players there. The Ice Beam into the Incineroar to try and catch the Rillaboom really makes a lot of sense there, but Harrold being able to catch onto that, switching in the Urshifu instead. You still have access to close combat as well, most likely on the Urshifu. Even though your Xerneas has just gone to sleep from that Yawn, you can still throw in some very good damage down into the opposing Gastrodon with a close combat. And the Volcarona, it's not going to be doing too much damage to the Urshifu either. It's only got access to Heat Wave and Struggle Bugs. That's not going to be able to hit the Urshifu with any super effective or even neutral damage at this point. So the Urshifu, even though it can't go for the Surging Strikes into the Volcarona, it's still sitting in a reasonably comfortable position. You can still get a huge amount of damage down onto the Gastrodon, but you do need to start picking up knockouts pretty quickly at this point, because we have just seen there is only 3 minutes left in this game. No one's taken a knockout at this point. Both players still have access to all 4 of their Pokemon, so at the moment it's going to come down to HP, but if you can try and get some knockouts, that will be pushing it for a timer win.
Yeah, Orlando definitely going to need a lot of big damage quickly, as he has the lower amount of HP from what we've seen. Struggle Bug will not be doing that big damage, though, instead going for that special attack drop onto the Xerneas, as the Urshifu going for another U-turn. Something we haven't really talked about yet. I wonder if that U-turn is an indication of what item that Urshifu is holding. A choice band selected attack certainly would not be a nice thing to lock into, because if you lock into close combat, you're going to be keeping those defense drops. If you lock into surging strikes, you're not going to be able to attack when the Gastrodon's on the field. Rillaboom just really the better Pokemon suited for this turn, and also suited to take the Earth Power, as again, hardly any damage coming out from the field for both these trainers.
Yeah, not going for the Ice Beam prediction that turn. It would have been very nice to try and catch the Rillaboom, but yeah, the Urshifu going for the U-turn instead. Not opting for the damage. The close combat would have probably been enough to knock out the Gastrodon in 2 shots, but yeah, going for the U-turn, always or certainly going to indicate some kind of choice item, whether that's the choice band or the choice scarf on that Urshifu. So really still not much damage coming out from this turn. We're down into the last couple as well. We've seen there's less than 2 minutes at this point. Maybe the Rillaboom's able to pick up knockout on the Gastrodon, but then you've still got the Incineroar that could easily switch in at this point. It'll come down to whether the Xerneas is able to wake up as well. With the second Geomancy, it's going to be sitting at a reasonable amount of special attack. Would still be able to do some very reasonable damage. So we'll have to see if it's able to wake up here, because that Incineroar did switch in for the Gastrodon.
And will be bringing an Intimidate with it as well. So regardless of which target Rillaboom selected here, if it went for an attack into the Gastrodon or the Volcarona with a fake out, not going to be dealing as much damage. But there's the Flame Body activation. That'll certainly help Orlando. Xerneas remains asleep, and Volcarona is unable to move.
And that could potentially be the last turn. Both players will have to opt in for this final turn potentially, because if only one player doesn't put in their moves into this last turn, then it will be game over, and we'll have to see what would happen there, because both players still have all 4 of their Pokemon. We'll have to see where the HPs are going to be landing here, especially with all this extra burn and grassy terrain. It actually took away like half of the time turn at the end there. We're down to just 20 seconds. It looks like Orlando is opting to go in for the attack. We'll have to see if Harrold is going to be matching that. And yeah, it looks like both players opted for one final turn.
Looks like it, as Rillaboom using this last turn to switch out, and the Urshifu taking the field in its spot. Not having to worry about a turn after this one. It's really the perfect switch in, as it will be resisting any fire type attacks from this Volcarona. Fake out into the Xerneas. Heat Wave missing the Urshifu. Will connect with the Xerneas, but does so little damage that grassy terrain is going to heal it right back up. As we are looking at a very, very close tiebreaker situation for this game one, as I think the game is now over. I'm not sure. I wouldn't be surprised to see more switches, but I think it's over.
I also hope it's over at this point as well. I think we've seen enough switches in this first game at this point. But yeah, the battle timer has hit 0. As soon as the moves are inputted, we will find out who will win at this point. It's going to be pretty close. The HPs are still relatively healthy with all the grassy terrain recovery that's been going on, and not too much damage coming out either. It is going to be very close what's going to happen here. You might as well take your extra thinking time as well. It makes sense to try and think for the next game, but it does look like the Harrold did have the higher amount of HP, so Harrold is going to be taking this first game.
What a rough game one for both these trainers. You know, there were so many switches in and out, in and out. We saw a second Geomancy from the Xerneas, which is something it's very rare to see that. You have to wonder what their mindset is going to be going into game two, as it with such a close game the first time around. You just have to wonder, like, what's the adjustment that you make? Do you bring the Xerneas, or do you just go for another grueling game two and hope that this time maybe you switch a little bit better than your opponent?
It seemed like both players potentially had a slight advantage if there wasn't that one tech move on both sides. There was the Roar coming out from the Incineroar that put a stop to the Volcarona, which was sitting in a really comfortable position. Without the Roars, the Volcarona may have just sat there for the entire game, just quiver dancing, and then eventually spamming those Struggle Bugs and Heat Waves. And then the Yawn coming out from the Gastrodon as well. The second Geomancy made a lot of sense. It would have put on a lot of offensive pressure with the Xerneas. It was going to get it up for free with the Gastrodon and the Volcarona facing it down. But then the Yawn being able to put a stop to that second Geomancy. We saw it got the 3 turns of sleep, wasn't able to fire off any other attacks, and then the time ran out. So just very nice tech choices coming out from both players to put a stop to the opponent from being able to run away with the game. Meant that we got that slow, grinded out game with all 4 Pokemon still available, no KOs going into the game in game 1. I was a little bit surprised not to see the Stack Attacker or the Shedinja come out for Harrold's side of the field, but ended up not facing that Xerneas anyway. So leaving them on the bench definitely made a lot of sense if you're not expecting the Xerneas. Maybe we are going to be seeing the Xerneas come out for Orlando here, because that is going to be the best way of dealing damage. And if you want to avoid that slow, grinded out game once again, you want to be putting on as much offensive pressure as you can. And Xerneas would absolutely be the way to do that. But at the same time, Harrold's could be adjusting, going with that Stack Attack to try and counter it, going with that Shedinja as well, just to make it completely immune. A Shedinja, if it can't be hit by the opposing team, may end up being a nice slow and drawn out game once again, because you can still defeat the Shedinja if you've still got the Pokemon advantage at the end of the game. So we'll have to see if that's going to be an adjustment that's coming out. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see the Xerneas coming out for Orlando here.
I wouldn't be surprised either, as Xerneas is also such a great Pokemon to use in any and all situations. We are going to be seeing a second Xerneas here from Harrold alongside that Incineroar once again, and Orlando bringing his own variant of Xerneas with the Amoonguss next to it. And, you know, while I would assume these Xerneases are fairly evenly matched, you have to think about this poor Amoonguss who's immediately going to be threatened by that Incineroar.
And you've got the fake out pressure from the Incineroar as well. I think it's quite kind of both players here to effectively show us Xerneas 101. Lead with Incineroar Xerneas or with Amoonguss Xerneas. Both are going to be able to help get out that Geomancy very nicely with the fake out pressure from the Incineroar, with the Spores and the Rage Powders from the Amoonguss as well. So it's definitely an interesting position. Whether you want to go for the fake out to try and stop the Geomancy, that would open you up to a Spore from the Amoonguss. If you go for a fake out into the Amoonguss, then you're effectively treating it as if you're both going to get out the Geomancies that turn, and then you have to play on from there. And then that would give the Amoonguss the slight advantage because you'd be able to Rage Powder those attacks away from your own Xerneas, limiting the opposing Xerneas into Dazzling Gleams here. But no Geomancy coming up from Harrold, instead going to be switching out that Xerneas.
Rillaboom taking the field and bringing that grassy terrain along with it. I'm sure whoever gets fake out this turn from that Incineroar will appreciate getting that little smidge of health back, given how that game 1 ended. No fake out though. Instead, Xerneas going straight for the Geomancy on Orlando's side of the field. A big switch up for him from that game 1, bringing the Xerneas this time as opposed to last time when he left it on the bench.
And there wasn't a fake out coming out from the Incineroar. We did see it was carrying the Roar as well. And Amoonguss didn't go for Rage Powder. That could potentially be coming up, but no, it's just the Flare Blitz into the Amoonguss.
Into the Aka Berry on Amoonguss, which is something I can confidently say I have not seen since probably 2011, as that was the year of the Aka Berry Amoonguss. But instead, Amoonguss going for Spore into the Rillaboom, so it is not effective at all.
And Orlando managed to get their Geomancy up effectively for free at this point. You do have to worry about the potential of the Roar that could be coming out from the Incineroar. You've got the fake out pressure from the Rillaboom, whether you go for the fake out into the Amoonguss and hope your Incineroar is able to survive that attack coming out from the Xerneas. It's taken a little bit of chip damage. Most Incineroars are able to survive that +2 Moonblast coming out from Xerneas, but any extra little bit of chip damage could put that over the edge. So maybe you do go for the fake out and the Roar into the Xerneas instead and just accept that you're going to get Spored maybe, especially if you are safety goggles. If you have safety goggles on the Incineroar, fake out and Roar into the Xerneas becomes a completely safe play. Otherwise, it's going to be a little bit awkward for that Incineroar to get that Roar off.
Well, Amoonguss leaving the field, making Incineroar feel a little bit safer as Volcarona takes its spot. Fake out from that Rillaboom into the Xerneas, and the Roar coming out from Incineroar, staying true to its name, forcing the Gastrodon onto the field for Orlando, confirming all 4 Pokemon that he's brought to this game.
And you've got to assume that that is going to be the safety goals on the Incineroar. That becomes a very unsafe play if you don't have it, but entirely safe if you do. So being able to take care of the Geomancy immediately on Orlando's side of the field. And have to go for those 2-turn Geomancies if they want to be matching in the future. And switching out the Xerneas on that turn 1 means you still have access to your own 1-turn Geomancy at this point. Dragging out the Gastrodon as well means it's going to be threatened down by that Rillaboom as well. You can get some parting shots into the Volcaronas to start neutering those Quiver Dances, which is what it's going to be going for here.
Quiver Dance, we've seen it before, making an appearance once again for Volcarona, acting almost like a pseudo Xerneas in that instance, as you turn into the Volcarona, not going to attack into the Gastrodon, but will be activating the Flame Body, which is going to be so critical for this Rillaboom. It will not be able to deal as much damage to the Gastrodon anymore, and almost makes the Gastrodon feel like a safer play to hang out on the field in front of that Rillaboom, at least maybe for the first couple of times that happens. Xerneas taking the place of that Rillaboom on the field and bringing back the Fairy Aura like we've seen it do many times before. Flare Blitz from Incineroar will connect with the Volcarona for some nice damage. And the Gastrodon wrapping up the turn with a yawn into the Incineroar.
Yeah, that's the damage that you need to be starting to do here. Getting the Volcarona down pretty low at this point. Still going to be able to recover a reasonable amount with the leftovers and the grassy terrain recovery as well, but you do need to start doing damage at this point, and that's a very good start coming out from the Incineroar. You could just Parting Shot out of that Yawn as well, but you do have to worry about the potential of a double protect coming out from the Volcarona and the Gastrodon as well. So if you do just straight up switch your Incineroar out, no Parting Shots, just a regular old switch, you guarantee that you're not going to sleep that turn. If you go for the Parting Shot, that's more beneficial if you're able to get it off, because you'll get that damage reduction, but that does open the opportunity to land into that double protect, and then you get that Sleeping Incineroar. But then if you go for the double protect, that just means the Xerneas is able to get the Geomancy up. So it's still a pretty reasonable position coming out for Harrold here, because you should be able to get that Incineroar off the field. The Gastrodon probably wants to still be going for the Yawn into the Xerneas, but no Parting Shot is going to come out here. You're guaranteeing that the Yawn is not going to go off, switching the Incineroar straight out into that Rillaboom.
Rillaboom also going to have some nice priority access with another Fake Out the next turn. Volcarona with a Protect. Moonblast from Xerneas into the Gastrodon. Does a nice amount of damage. Also gets that special attack drop, as Gastrodon will be able to connect a Yawn with the Xerneas. Putting Harrold in a tough position again. Do you keep the Xerneas on the field, or do you switch it out immediately like you did with Incineroar the prior turn?
You probably still put the Gastrodon in range of even the burned Rillaboom at this point. Even with the extra bit of recovery, that Moonblast doing a really nice chunk of damage. And not going for the Geomancy means you can just switch out the Xerneas of the Yawn and switch it back in at some point in the future. So it's still quite a nice position for Harrold here. You've got the Quiver Dance at least on the Volcarona. That should be able to do some very good damage to the Rillaboom and whatever would switch in for the Xerneas, or the Xerneas if it wants to just stay in and go on the offensive and just accept the sleep. But not going to be accepting the sleep, going to be switching straight back out into that Incineroar.
Given how critical every little bit of damage was in the last game, I am not surprised to see Harrold switch out that Xerneas. Putting a Pokemon to sleep, especially letting that Xerneas fall to sleep in that game one, was really detrimental for his overall strategy. And honestly, Incineroar isn't the worst switch in here. There's only so much damage that the Volcarona will be doing to that slot, and given that we also saw Orlando switch in the Amoonguss for the Volcarona, for the Gastrodon, having that Incineroar on the field with Flare Blitz is going to be a really nice adjustment for Harrold, as Orlando goes for the Struggle Bug into the opposing side of the field for his only attack this turn.
It's somewhat covering for the Xerneas staying in there, trying to get that drop onto it. Not going to be too effective onto the Rillaboom and the Incineroar. Could have potentially gone for the Heat Wave instead. Done a bit more damage to the Rillaboom and the Incineroar as well. But Struggle Bug's still going to get that guaranteed damage as well. And Amoonguss is pretty much back at full HP here at this point. We'll have to see if it's able to survive the Flare Blitz coming out from the Incineroar. We know the Aqua Berry's been used up at this point. Could be trying to get something like a Pollen Puff into the Volcarona, because you can't go for a Sport into either the Rillaboom or assumedly the Incineroar at this point. I don't think we've actually confirmed the safety goggles, but based on the raw play, you would be able to assume that it's going to be safety goggles at this point. You could be trying to keep the Volcarona safe with a Rage Powder if you're hoping it's not the safety goggles in the Incineroar, but if it is, it's able to just get that Flare Blitz into the Volcarona. We saw it do a huge amount of damage in that first couple of turns. And maybe the combination of even just any attack from the Rillaboom and the Incineroar could be able to KO this Volcarona, because you can ignore the Rage Powder completely with the Grass typing and the Assumed Safety Goggles as well. So maybe going for the Pollen Puff into the Volcarona. If you're able to survive, you'll be able to recover yourself up. But if the combination of attacks of the Rillaboom and the Incineroar is enough to KO the Volcarona, the Pollen Puff is going to be useless there.
The Pollen Puff will be useless, but first there must be another switch, as Xerneas taking the field again, still having access to Power Herb, and could possibly use this opportunity to finally set up Geomancy for Harrold. Heat Wave, though, going to do some nice damage to the Xerneas ahead of time. Flare Blitz from the Incineroar connects into the Volcarona and picks up the knockout. Not targeting the Amoonguss there, but I think very smartly taking out the only other offensive Pokemon that Orlando has besides that Xerneas, and Pollen Puff unable to heal the Volcarona as it was knocked out.
Unfortunate side Pollen Puff there. You never want to be seeing that when your Pokemon gets knocked out, but what is this, 30 minutes into the match and we've got our first KO, so finally being able to pick up a knockout with that Incineroar, getting the Flare Blitz onto the Volcarona. The Xerneas switching in here, it doesn't have access to the one-turn Geomancy, the opposing Xerneas on Harrold's side does. Maybe the Amoonguss is going to be in range of the Flare Blitz coming out from the Incineroar. Could be in range of a Moonblast of the Xerneas from Orlando. It's below half HP here at this point. Most likely going to be in range of that. That could open up the Amoonguss to be able to go for a Spore into the opposing Xerneas. Even if it gets that Geomancy up, you'd be able to get that Spore into the opposing Xerneas and put it to sleep. You've got to contend with the Rillaboom potentially switching in as well. That could be eating up the Spore and just saving that Xerneas once again. And whether the Moonblast does go into that Incineroar, whether it's able to pick up the knockout as well. Because if the Incineroar is able to get off an attack into the opposing Amoonguss, that will be doing a huge amount of damage with the Flare Blitz, but not going to be risking it here. Going to be switching straight back out into the Rillaboom.
Oh no, the Rillaboom taking the spot of the Incineroar on Harrold's side of the field. Very curious to see Xerneas sticking around. I think that Harrold's in a really tough spot where Xerneas is the win con for Harrold, and you gotta keep it safe. Fortunately, there is one way to protect your Xerneas without switching it, and that's ironically by using Protect. Moonblast from Orlando Xerneas will connect into that Rillaboom, bringing it down into the red, and Amoonguss Spore connecting with the protecting Xerneas.
Yeah, this is a much stronger position for Harrold now. You've got the fake out pressure active. That will put a stop to the spores that could come out from the Amoonguss. And then you'll be able to get that Geomancy up even in the face of the opposing Xerneas here, which is exactly what Harrold should be looking to do here. Getting that Geomancy up, getting the special defense boost so you can take on the opposing Xerneas better. Make sure you're going to be the faster Xerneas as well. You'd have to go for the 2-turn Geomancy with the Xerneas now on Orlando's side of the field now that the power has been used up. But because the 1-turn can happen on Harrold's side of the field, if you do opt to go for the 2-turn, that leaves your Xerneas completely vulnerable on the next turn. No potential protects that could come out because you're locked into that 2 turns of Geomancy. But that could be keeping that Xerneas very vulnerable at that point. You've still got the Amoonguss to be able to keep it somewhat safe. You can redirect the Moonblast away. Not the Dazzling Gleams though. You would need to make sure you're getting a Spore into the opposing Xerneas, but you're not going to be able to do that when you're getting faked out.
Geomancy from the Xerneas on Orlando's side of the field. I had to pause for a second there, as that will be the 2-turn Geomancy, as Harrold free to go for a 1-turn Geomancy as the power herb is still intact. The flinch on the Amoonguss means that it will not be able to put the Xerneas to sleep this turn, and Harrold in a prime position to use something like a Moonblast or possibly even a Dazzling Gleam at this point to pick up the knockout on Orlando's Xerneas and bring him one step closer to victory.
If you go for the Dazzling Gleam, that's definitely going to connect with the Xerneas. If you go for the Moonblast, that opens you up to be Rage Powdered by the opposing Amoonguss. That means that the Xerneas on Orlando's side of the field will be able to match it. Most likely going to be able to survive the +2 Dazzling Gleam. That means you should be getting your Geomancy set up on Orlando's side of the field. We did see it move first as well before the opposing Xerneas, so Harrold's not going to have the faster Xerneas. That means if the Geomancy does get set up on Orlando's side of the field, you're most likely going to be able to move first with your own one. You'll be able to pick up the knockout on the opposing Rillaboom, but the Xerneas is still pretty healthy on both sides of the field, so if the two Geomancies are opposing each other, it's still going to be a little bit of a grind to break through the opposing Xerneas.
Rage Powder from Amoonguss will be protecting Orlando Xerneas from the incoming Moonblast on the opposing side of the field. Does not do enough damage for the KO and appears to be a 2-hit knockout after grassy terrain recovery. So something really important to keep in mind for the next turn, as Orlando is able to successfully use that Geomancy a second time. U-turn from the Rillaboom, not affected by Rage Powder, will connect with Orlando's Xerneas and give Harrold the opportunity to send in a Pokemon that can possibly take advantage of the Rage Powder to target that Amoonguss a little bit better than the Rillaboom.
Incineroar would be one of those Pokemon who would be able to get the fake out pressure once again, but it is pretty low at this point. It's absolutely going to be in range of a +2 Dazzling Gleam or a Moonblast at this point, but at least you get the fake out pressure back onto the field because the Geomancies have been matched at this point, and Orlando is somewhat in a reasonable position at this point, getting that 2-turn Geomancy up for free and getting the better end of that prediction, going for the Rage Powder in the face of the Moonblast. Not going for the Dazzling Gleam with the Xerneas on Harrold's side of the field. That would have been much better into the opposing Xerneas. Being able to get that +2 damage before that Geomancy would have been set up at that point. But getting the Rage Powder to keep it safe from the Moonblast ending up working out really well for Orlando there. Now maybe trying to get a Spore into the opposing Xerneas. It's going to be a little bit awkward with the Incineroar because it's got the fake out pressure. But if you go for the fake out into the opposing Xerneas, that leaves yourself open to be Spored. And if you go for the fake out into the opposing Amoonguss instead, it's just what we're seeing. The Xerneas is going to have free range for this Dazzling Gleam.
And it will connect and knock out the opposing Incineroar, bringing Harrold's own Xerneas down to below half its health. Moonblast from his Xerneas, though, connecting with that Amoonguss and missing out on the knockout. So Amoonguss probably not left with enough health to stick around for a full turn to Spore, but certainly with enough health to redirect another Moonblast from Orlando Xerneas.
Yeah, so it'd probably have to be the Dazzling Gleam instead, and Stack Attacker is going to be joining the field, so that was the adjustment that Harrold did end up making, and it makes a lot more sense now why the Amoonguss was being targeted down so heavily with the Moonblast, not going for the Dazzling Gleams instead to try and hit the Xerneas. It doesn't matter if you're chipping away the Xerneas, the Gyro Ball is just going to be able to cleanly knock it out, even from full HP, especially because there's no Incineroar to be able to intimidate anymore. So yeah, really smart targeting of the Amoonguss with the Xerneas. It's now going to be in range of another Moonblast, or potentially even a Dazzling Gleam at this point. You're probably not going to be able to pick up the knockout on either the Xerneas or the Stack Attacker, even with a Moonblast at this point with the Xerneas. And that's going to just leave it completely open to the Gyro Ball from the Stack Attacker at this point. So really nice reveal of the Stack Attacker at the end for Harrold, keeping it safe this entire time, waiting in the back, and now it's facing down exactly what it wants to be, because you can just take care of the Amoonguss with your own Xerneas, and then it'll just be able to land that Gyro Ball into the opposing Xerneas.
Moonblast from Orlando Xerneas, missing the knockout on Harrold Xerneas, who then uses Moonblast to pick up the KO onto the Amoonguss. And Stack Attacka now is its time to attack with the Gyro Ball into the opposing Xerneas, and that's easily going to be a knockout for Harrold.
Yeah, and now that this game is securely in Harrold's favor at this point, you're getting the Beast Boost to boot on the Stack Attacker. At least it's going to be defense, so it's not going to be doing as much damage with its attacks into the Volcarona that's waiting in the back. But it hasn't got its Quiver Dances up at this point, so you've still got the Geomancy on the Xerneas. You just get to click, it's even the Gastron actually, sorry, because the Volcarona was even KO'd. So Gastron even less likely to be able to take on this Xerneas. It would have been very good into the Stack Attacker. Earth Power is almost certainly going to be KOing the Stack Attacker, but yeah, it can't take on the Xerneas. One Moonblast is going to be finishing off this game, and completely changed up for the game 2 from that game 1, with no knockouts, but a lot more offense going into this game 2, and Harrold is able to take it 2-0.
Congratulations to Harrold. That was such a grueling game 1. To see him correctly predict that Orlando was going to bring the Xerneas to game 2 and bring that Stack Attacker as a result was really a thrilling end to a very slow, meticulous set of games.
Yeah, it's entirely different. You can see the dynamics changing completely between the game ones. It's just a lot of pivoting around, a lot of U-turns, passing shots, a lot of grassy terrain recovery, meaning that every Pokemon was able to survive the entire 20 minutes. And then you can see what happens when the Geomancy gets set up with the Xerneas, even on both players as well. Even getting the two-turn Geomancy to be able to set up as well meant that there were actually KOs in that game, which turned it on its head a lot more than in that game 1. And yeah, Harrold was just able to get that better end of it with keeping the Stack Attacker safe in the back, revealing it at the last possible moment, and the perfect time as well. When the Amoonguss was in range to be KO'd, it was able to just get that Gyro Ball straight into the Xerneas, take it out in one shot, and secure the game.
Yeah, so Singapore taking its first win against Peru for the week as of right now on the website. I'll even hit refresh just to be sure. They are currently behind by a single game to Peru with many more matches to be played. And we still have many more matches to be featuring on stream today. So thank you all so much for watching, and please stay tuned as this is the top 16 round of the Victory Road World Tour sponsored by Elgato.